So it is May wrap-up time. This is a bit delayed, mainly because I was trying to finish the book that I started at the end of May, and it took this long to do so, meh. Firstly, I'm going to jump to myself of the past to tell you about my library pick, which has already gone back to the libraries I filmed before, so here we go. Hello, my library book for the month of May was The Astonishing Life of Octavian Nothing by M.T. Anderson. This is volume 1, The Pox Party. There is also another volume, which I will be picking up. Firstly, I will say that I found this in the YA section of the library. I don't personally think that I would classify this as YA. I think it's got a lot more to it than that. And a lot of people have said the same in reviews I've read since reading it, but needless to say, if you're looking for this, it'll be in the YA section. This is a book of a few parts, really, and it did at times seem a bit bitty, but looking at it as a whole, it's an excellent read, and it all comes together very well. In the first section of this, we meet Octavian when he is a boy. He is a prince, and his mum was a queen in their tribe in Africa. However, they have been sort of overthrown, I suppose, by the people, and they have been sent over as slaves. I'm not sure if this is based in England or America. I never quite gathered. Okay, I want to say England, but I can't. Anyway, so they're sent to this. They end up in this college of lucidity, I think it's called, and the people there are doing experiments on them. Octavian particularly becomes their subject. They do a lot of tests on him. For example, they weigh all his excrement and everything like that. Basically, the reason they're doing this is to find out what the differences between black and white are, whether black people react the same as white people, etc., etc., which, you know, is absolutely shocking, really, but in those days, it's in the 1700s, so you can believe that something like that would be going on. However, the college falls into hard times and becomes financially unstable. They have to get an investor, and his way of doing things is very different. Octavian gets treated a lot more like a slave, and things go from there, really. This is really excellent in terms of a view on slavery. It's really interesting and different. I loved some of the sentences in here, just make you stop and go wow, especially from the philosophers of the College of Lucidity. They say some amazing things. And you really grow to love Octavian and really feel for him. It's just a really good read. It experiments with different forms of medium, like there's Octavian's sort of diary, I suppose, is the majority of the book, but we also get newspaper clippings. One of the sections is written completely in letters, etc., etc., and it's just really excellent read, and it completely took me by surprise because I just picked it up because it's I love the cover and it just kind of appealed to me. I don't know why, but I'm really glad I did, and I'm really hoping that I can pick up the next in the series. So that was that one. And then I read The 5 People We Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. This is my first Mitch Albom, and while I loved the writing, the book was lacking for me. As you can see, it is a short story, or a short book, and I feel it needed to be a lot more padded out and a lot bigger. Basically, this is about a man, Eddie. We follow him. He works in a sort of pier, sort of theme parky thing, and we meet him just before he's about to die, and it sort of counts down to his death, so, you know, it starts at the end, as it were. And he dies because one of the rides goes wrong, and he tries to sort of save this little girl by jumping in front of her when the ride sort of plunges down, basically. And then we follow him through his journey in heaven, where he meets 5 people who sort of teach him about the interconnectivity of everything and sort of try and teach him a lesson about life. The thing for me, I mean, the writing is gorgeous, and I'm definitely going to read more Mitch Albom, but it was lacking in the way that the story didn't really hold itself. Even though the writing was epic, the story just was lacking for me. I felt the 5 people he met as well. I know it's Mitch Albom's story, and if he says that's the 5 people he would meet in heaven, that's the 5 people he would meet in heaven. But for me, if it was my story, I wouldn't have had those 5 people, because I think of all the people in your life that, you know, it's people that Eddie didn't necessarily know or have anything to do with, but people who he has affected in some way throughout his life. And I think if you're only going to meet 5 people in heaven, it would be people that had a bit more to do with you than the people that he meets. I know it's all to do with, you know, he didn't necessarily know that he had affected these people's lives, but he had. But I just felt some of them I could understand, and some of them I just thought, I don't really, considering it was a short book as well, I felt like we could have learnt more about him from having a character that maybe knew him a little bit more. Anyway, that's what I thought of that one. It was good, but slightly lacking. Then I read Beautiful Chaos by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. This is the third in the, I don't know what it's called, the Beautiful Creatures series. I believe there's been one more as well. And I enjoyed this. I always go into these thinking, oh, here we go. But actually I do get into them. Like, the writing's not amazing, although it is actually, for the kind of series this is, sort of young adult, typical sort of vampires and all this underworldy stuff, it actually does have quite good writing for what it is. So props to that. I do always enjoy them, and obviously I can't say much about this because there's been 2 others that I don't want to spoil if nobody's read them. I have to say the cliffhanger on the end of this was just like, no, why? Cliffhangers do irritate me when I haven't got access to the last one, because it's like, but it was okay. It was an easy-ish read, so yeah. Then I read Operating Instructions by Anne Lamott. I have a complete love obsession with Anne Lamott. I haven't read any of her fiction, and I have heard that her fiction isn't that great, but her memoirs are amazing, starting with Bird by Bird, which absolutely blew me away, which is her writing memoir. And I then read Hard Laughter, which is a fictionalised account of her father's struggle with cancer, and this is a account of her son's first year, and it's just hilarious. She is so funny, and it's truthful, and that's the thing I love about her, is she's truthful. She doesn't glitter coat everything. It's, you know, at one point he's crying. I mean, she was a single mum, and it was sort of an unexpected birth anyway, a pregnancy anyway, and it sort of through her. I don't think she ever intended to be a mother. However, she absolutely loved her son and ended up doting on him, but there are some times where he won't stop crying, or where she's having a particularly bad day. There's even one entry in this where she says, "You are scum, I hate you." Which, you know, you think, oh, but actually, you know, I'm sure mothers do feel like that sometimes, especially if they're on their own and struggling and lacking sleep, etc, etc. I just love the honesty of her. One thing about this that did confuse me is the time I found was a bit all over the place. That sometimes we were with her then looking back on the birth and things like that, and sometimes we were in the present day, like it was written as a diary, I think, of his first year. So, but I mean, I don't know, I'd recommend it to everyone. I think Anne Lamott's quite an acquired taste, but I adore her, and I intend to start some of her fiction, because I think, because I love her so much, I will have an affinity with it, even if it's not amazing, hopefully. Talking of people whose fictions aren't amazing, but I love, we have Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. This was a reread for me. I read this when I was about 16, and at the time of reading, I was absolutely obsessed with everything Sylvia Plath. I adored her, and I hated this book. I really didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed it slightly more this time, but I still didn't love it. I think I have actually written a blog post about this, which I will link down below, which goes into a lot more detail, obviously. I think Sylvia Plath herself knew that fiction writing wasn't her forte. There is glimpses of her beautiful poetic language in this, but the story wasn't great. It's basically semi-autobiographical. It's about a 19-year-old girl called Esther, and we meet her first when she is doing a month's sort of work placement in New York with a big fashion magazine, and it's meant to be this really coveted position that she's got, and she just doesn't really appreciate it. I felt my main issue with this was that I didn't like Esther, and she's ungrateful and just a bit not built up enough for me, which I feel like is probably because Sylvia Plath wrote her based on herself, and I think that's always a mistake, because when you're writing a character based on yourself, you don't build them up the way you should. But anyway, and so yes, we meet her in New York doing this work placement, and then the book's very much split into 2 halves, because we have the New York part, and then all of a sudden she's back home, she's gone absolutely crazy, and she's in a mental institute, and it happens literally just like that. I feel like the second half I probably enjoy more. I don't feel like the New York part was necessary. I think it was sort of an attempt to build the character, but it didn't really work, and she wasn't a likeable character. That said, you know, I think a lot of people love this because they can't separate the fact that Sylvia Plath did kill herself, and, you know, but I think I need to look at this as a work of fiction in itself. I didn't love it. Obviously, it's touching that it's about mental illness, and what happened to Sylvia Plath, obviously, is very upsetting. But for me, I've read books about mental illness that were better than this, I'm afraid. Sorry, Sylvia Plath. I, you know, still love your poetry. Then I read, and this is the one that took me a long time to finish, The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell, which is a beast of a book. This is my first David Mitchell. Now, I've had Cloud Atlas for a long time. I tried to start it when I was about 18 and just found it too heavy going. The first voice is sort of the olden day voice, which is set on a ship, and I found it quite difficult to read. I do actually want to reread Cloud Atlas and get a bit further, but I thought The Bone Clocks might be a bit of a more accessible read, and I've heard it has been, and I think it was. Obviously, the beautiful cover cannot be avoided. Let's just admire this thing of beauty, which I absolutely adore. And, yes, basically, for those of you who aren't familiar with David Mitchell, he's a writer that he writes sort of short stories that all interlink together. With this, I don't want to say too much about this book. I warn you now, I went into it knowing practically nothing, and I feel like it enriched my experience. I feel like telling you anything would spoil things. Basically, our main character in this is Holly Sykes. She is the first voice, and every voice, they either meet her in some way or have something to do with her. Obviously, with a book like this, you're going to have voices that you like less than others, and that did happen. But it was enjoyable, and it was magical, and there's quite a lot of magical realism in this as well, which I don't normally like, but I really enjoyed it in this, and I would recommend it. Probably as, for me, a starting point for David Mitchell. Not that I've read any of his other works, but for me, it wasn't too daunting like I found Cloud Atlas to be, and I think it's, yes, definitely worth a read. Right, that's everything. Sorry about the delay and whatnot, couldn't be helped. I took my time with The Bone Clocks. It took me about 2 weeks to read, and I didn't mind because it was just that beautiful. So that's my excuses. Bye!